yeah, um, let's look at the building blocks and then the features, and then we will talk about variables, data types, and operators. I'll probably emphasize upon some of this operator which will have, which is either new compared to other languages that you might know, or behave it slightly differently as far as Python is concerned. Right. Then we will talk about conditions and loops, and then functions. So there are two type of functions we will be discussing: the built-in functions that Python provides. So we have about 75 built-in functions that is part of the language, and during the course probably we will touch upon like at least half of them. And then we will talk about how to write our own functions, which is the user-defined functions. Then we will talk about modules. So modules are basically collections of functions that are kept in a separate file, which you could import, right? So there are three types of modules. One is the core modules, something that Python provides you. Okay, so Python is known for it. A vast array of modules to solve various issues. So random number generation, file handling like CSV, XML, JSON, like database processing. At least SQLite is part of Python language. Statistical functions and networking functions like web crawling. So there are like hundreds of modules that are inbuilt, as opposed to like in some other languages. If you want to process a CSV file, you might have to install packages or modules by yourself. The second type is there are modules that are shared by people. So it is part of a Python package index, which you would be able to install either you on your local machine or the system administrator on the server, right? And the third type of module is the user-defined modules. So when we look into reusability, the first thing that we might do is like we will abstract and refactor the code, and then we will create functions, right, which will be useful within the same script. And then over a period of time, so when you abstract more and more, there you will find that some of these functions can be used across scripts, right? So when you take those functions separately and put it in a file, and when you import that, so that is going to be a user-defined modules. So we will look into some of those core modules as the session proceeds, and we will look at a couple of third-party modules. Especially there is one called Faker, so which can be which has a canned functions, like probably around 100 functions to create random data, all the way from last name, first name, address, city, UUIDs, IP addresses, email IDs, and so on, right? And we will quickly talk about how to create our own models at the very basic level, right? And we will be discussing about the file IO operation, which is kind of, that's when we will make our scripting experience much more, usable, right? So until we hit the file handling part, so what we will be doing is like we'll be either providing data like hard coding as literals, or like you will get from keyboard, whatever it is. But once you have this exposure, so you would be able to read, write data from file. So once we talk about the file IO operations, we will also talk about modules that support us to create, read multiple files on a given directory, and then like you would be able to apply whatever logic you have written for one file. So sort of a wrapper utility, right? So maybe like you have written one a script to read a log file and then extract data and create some report, right? One log, one report. Now you might want to do that for hundreds of logs sitting in one particular directory. So we would be able to use a module called OS. So that will give us option to list the files on a given directory. So the good thing about the OS module is there is a function provided by the OS module. So it doesn't matter whether you're running on a Windows machine or a Linux machine or a Mac. So there is a same function that can get you the list of files, right? And then we will talk about at least one case study. I have two in mind. One is to create some random test data, probably like 10 to 15 fields. So using the faker module. The other one is converting a fixed file to delimited file or a delimited file to fixed file using a configuration, right? Like a JSON configuration where so you would be able to either convert that based on, like, if it's a CSV file, so we will have a configuration for the output file that says this is the length, so I want to zero fill and so on. And we would be also able to rearrange the fields, right? This case study, we can look at the JSON module, CSV module, and file IO operations, all things together, right? Like so you will have exposure to the file IO operation, and along with how Python process JSON and CSV files. Okay, so CSV file, you even though like you can just read the record and then you can use the split function to split it by comma. So there are cases where the CSV will the data itself will have comma and then it will be quoted. So Microsoft Excel can automatically format that, but like if we just split by comma, then we might split it in places where we don't want to. So the CSV module provides methods so that those kind of things are taken care. Okay, so this is what we are going to cover in the next 2 weeks. Okay. So there will be some miscellaneous topic. Again, depends on how fast we proceed. I might add upon a few more things. Okay, but this is the overall topic. Okay. So I'm just going to go through this very quickly. So Python is a high-level programming language, so that will provide syntax and constructs in such a way that like you can write an English-like program, right? And it is interpreted in the sense like, unlike C or Java, you don't have to do a compile and then convert this into machine code. So it is automatically done, right? So in the past, so this would be an issue in terms of performance, but with just-in-time compilation and then some internal representations, the performance difference between really compiled languages and interpreted languages are thinning, especially with the computing power. So it is theoretically possible that the worst way written C program might be performing slower than the best written Python program. Okay, but yet interpreted languages or scripting languages have their own advantage. So you can quickly develop things. So you can create prototypes and so on. Right. So they may not be scaled well on certain applications that requires heavy computing and then managing low-level resources like memory and all by the program. But otherwise, interpreted languages have the space in certain areas like automation, scripting, test data generation, and so on. Right. And another distinct difference between the compiled and interpreted languages, the typing, right? So Python is a dynamically typed language in the sense when you declare a variable, you don't have to tell that this variable is of this data type, like the way you do in other languages. So the data type of a variable solely depend on the value it is hosting, right? So let's say I have a variable called name, and then I have assigned mk to it, so it is a string, right? All the properties of a string will be applicable on that variable. And the moment I assign a number, probably like 24, then that variable will start behaving like an integer. Okay, so that means the data type of a variable is not bound for the entire program's life. It is the duration on which it is the variable is holding the data. This comes very handy because, like, you don't have to declare multiple variables. So you read a data and a variable, from a file or somewhere. You could have some additional code to take care of what type of data you are expecting, right? So there are methods available. So it will make it easy. But if you come from language like C or Java, C++, it might be a bit difficult to comprehend. But this is what you need to keep in mind. A variable behaves based on its value, right? So it is very simple in the sense, like, at least when we were in college, most of the people studied C as a beginner language, right? And nowadays, I think Python is a de facto choice for universities to introduce programming to people. Yet it is very versatile. So you could, do all this current cutting edge technology work, data science, data mining, big data, machine learning, artificial intelligence, data visualization in Python. So there are a lot of modules that are available. Python is, still one of the most popular programming language. So after this session, depends on what is your interest. So you can pick up some books or videos, and then you can learn the modules that corresponds to your area of interest. For example, like if you are going to do data science, so you might want to look at, there is a module called NumPy, which is to process two-dimensional array of numbers. So there is pandas, again, another module to do data analytics. So if you want to do visualization, so there is matplotlib. And if you want to do a lot of reporting, like HTML, PDF, and so on, so there is a reportlib. So the scikit for machine learning. So there are so many things that are available. So all those modules offer is, like, if you know how to import a module, so if you know how to read a documentation, then you are set to go. You just apply whatever you learned in this basics course, and then you are good to go. You still have to learn some of those concepts, but I think that you will do with a minimal exposure. Like, for example, like object-oriented programming in Python, so you might need to know a bit of that if you need to use certain modules. Okay, so that's what we are dealing with. And when I say simple, let me show you a demo on that, right? So let's say if you want to write a program to swap two numbers, right? So this is what you do in Java. So it is probably around 17 lines, excluding the comment. So in order to swap the number, so we know the basic logic, right? So we will keep a temporary variable, and then we will assign the first number to that temporary variable, and then we will assign the second number to the first number, and then and so on, right? Like, so that's how we do a swap. Okay, but if you want to learn, if you want to do how it is can be done in Java, then this is what you are looking at. So you need to know what public is, you need to know what class is, what static is, and then what void is, and then system.out.println and all those things, right? So around 15 lines of code, this is what you're looking at, right? So that's Java. Probably C, probably like you don't need a class, but it would be around 10 lines, right? And so here is a Perl program. But again, so this is swapping without a temporary variable. So we use the XOR operation. But if you look at it, that's pretty much the same. So you don't have any method calls, you don't have any classes, but still it is around 10 lines, right? So when it comes to Python, if you see line 6, right, that's the only line, right? A comma B equal to B comma A. So we call it as a tuple unpacking. So, based on the associativity, you don't need temporary variables, you don't need XOR operations. Python automatically takes care of swapping it, right? So it is that simple. Okay. I mean, like we could have shown the hello world example. Even then, like, Python and Perl would be like one liner, and Java would have taken like 6 or 7 lines. But when we talk about simplicity, that's what we are talking about, right? So a brief history. So Python was developed by Guido van Rossum. So it has no association with the snake. So it is based on a BBC comedy show called The Monty Python and Flying Circus. The reason I'm telling you is because like when you're reading some documentation, so you might come up with some slangs or references. Probably that is some dialogue from this show, right? So it was, even though Python is kind of in a cutting edge, it is not a not so new language, right? So it is, it's almost 40 years old, right? And so even though like it was work in progress from 90s, the first official release was in 1991. And at least as of January 2020, Python community actively supported 2 versions of Python, Python 2 and Python 3. There is still a plenty of code available in Python 2, right? But Python 3 is the future of Python, okay? And even though 90% of the code or syntax is pretty much same, so what we are going to look at in this current session is Python 3, okay? So even like when you're trying to download the Python language from the old site, right? So this is the screenshot of the Python website like 6 months ago, right? So if you look at it, there is a download Python 3.6, then download Python 2.7, right? So this was available on the python.org site, right? But now this is all you will see, like only Python 3.8.2 is the latest. Python 2 is still available. So if you go and look at the early release, like you can still download that, but it is not actively supported. So that means like, there are no activities happening. So probably Python 2.7.2 might be the latest of Python. Okay. So in case if you are supporting, any applications, there are white papers and articles available, and there are some modules like 2 to 3, right? Some conversion modules and all available. Okay. But like, please be aware, especially if you are using a Linux server to practice, Python might be already there. So, but you might have to look into the version just to ensure that you have version 3 installed. Okay, so but like if you have only version 2, or if you need to learn version 2 for project purpose, you can still use this knowledge. There are like a minor differences. I'll try to highlight them as we proceed. Okay. So yes, as of January 1st they mentioned, but I think the link disappeared on the Python site by end of January, I guess. It was not on January 1st. So it was postponed for a couple of times, even like this year. I thought they might extend, but apparently it is no longer available. So this is the guy who developed the Python language for us. Right? So there is 50% of activity done in this session, right? So I'm just going to talk about various concepts. I'll show you how to, like demo small code snippets, and then we will be sharing those. But nothing is going to be complete, or like you have to practice it yourself, right? So I understand with the current situation, everybody is working from home. So you might have challenges installing Python on your machine, right? So in that case, if you have personal laptops available, please use that. Okay. If not, there are ways you should be able to overcome. Okay. So first of all, you can install Python on your machine. So you can raise a tarmac request, and then you can get that installed if that is possible. You can run the Python command on the terminal if you are accessing a Mac or a Linux machine. So chances are that it might be already available, right? So once you have installed, if it is Windows, you can there will be one application on the start menu called IDLE. So you can open that and then you can practice. Or if you are using a Mac or Linux, you could just open the terminal and run Python, right? So once you have the software installed, all you need to do is just create the script, save it with .py, and then you can run like Python script name .py. The .py extension may be necessary on the Windows side, but the Linux and Mac, it doesn't matter. Okay, it is just for the humans to it's a human readable file name, so that like we understand that this is a Python file. Okay, here is another option. There is something called Anaconda distribution for Python. So it is another variation of Python called IPython. Right? It's written by somebody else. Okay. The advantage of that is it comes up with something called Jupyter Notebook. Okay, so Anaconda distribution will look like this when you install. Okay, so this will have lot of applications like Jupyter Notebook. So this is an HTML based application where you would be able to write code snippet. So you would be able to execute, and then you would be able to write your notes all in one place, right? And then you can convert that into PDF or HTML, or even like you can share the Jupyter Notebook which will have an IPYNB extension. So in that way, like especially like if you're having some issues, so you exactly give what did you do and then what was the outcome. Okay, so this is probably something that would be very helpful. So if you are sharing code, okay, but my suggestion would be start with the normal way of running Python, like installing Python, and then probably you can go for Anaconda. Okay, the reason is because by just creating a script on a notepad or application, at least initially on few programs, you might be forced to learn some of those syntaxes. Otherwise, these IDs usually highlight where there is a problem, you fix it, and then you forget it, right? So with respect to the current situation, let's say like you can't install any of those things. There are several online sites which might be accessible to you. Like there is a site called repl.it or like trinket.io/python3, and there are other sites like onlinegdb.com, or there is a Python Anywhere. So there are several sites where they will provide the Python shell for you, and also they'll provide like a one program called main.py. So you would be able to write your code or execute it. Probably, you just copy paste it on your local machine, save it with whatever suitable name, right? So this would be, pretty much okay for like whatever we are going to look at in the first 7-8 days, because we are just going to utilize whatever Python provides anyway, right? So, so these are some of those resources. Okay. So how do we check which version of Python once you have installed? So you simply run Python dash dash version. Okay. So when we run Python slash version, so it says Python 3.7.4. Okay, so this is the Python version I am having. So I'm good to go, right? So if you are using Jupyter Notebook, okay, so this is how, like when you click Jupyter Notebook, this is how you will get like a site where you would be able to create folders. So this will persist on your machine. Okay, so now I'm just going to create a new Python 3 file, and then probably I would call it as like apps SI01, right? So, and here I can run the underlying operating system command with the exclamation and then same thing, right? So Jupyter Notebook is a cell-based, system where, like, so you will have one cell, so you write the code, and then you can run it, right? So, for example, like, I want to add a comment, right? Cell above. I can simply say, right, um, I will convert that as select as that as a markdown, right? Then that is going to be your, whatever nodes you are putting, right? And then here is your code, and then here is your output. So I can simply say that, download it as HTML, and then if I look at it, so this is available, right? I can simply download and share it with you all, like, whatever we are running. So it's good, especially when you're doing practice, or like this session where the trainer can run some commands, and then they can share the code and comment with the user. Okay, so I can show you one of the example. So this is something that I have put in, like for one of the previous sessions. So we have several things that we shown with respect to various data types, right? So everything is available, and I can simply download, right? So this is an advantage. Okay, so choose whichever works for you. Okay, so and then practice. Okay, so this is how you will look at this thing. Okay, so now enough of theory. So let's get on to let's look into some hands-on. Okay, so we will look at some of those basic built-in functions first. Okay, so we'll be looking around 6 built-in functions before we proceed with the next topic. Okay. So the very first thing we typically do is a hello world, right? So print is a function that is provided by So I have included a cell and then I simply run. So you could use Control Enter, right? So the very first function, okay. So what does print do by default is like it can accept 0 or more data, right? It can be of any data type, comma separated, right? And then it prints on the screen by default, including a space as a separator between each word, right? Each piece of data that you passed as a comma separated parameters. Okay, so if you look at this example, so there is two print statement. One is just hello world within quotes, and then there is hello, and then there is world. So either way, if you look at it, the output is hello space world. Okay, so this is the very first function, a function that will be helpful in debugging code or writing some messages. So this is the basic usage, right? So what else can Python the prints do, right? So it also adds a default new line after each statement, right? The new line is automatically added. So it displays, displays the content on the screen, and then it adds a space as a separator, and then it adds new line, right? So what you can do is you can customize those things, right? Like, so instead of a space, if you want something else as a separator, you can definitely do that. Instead of a new line, if you want something else, like empty string or a space, you can do that as well. And by default, it writes the content of the print into the screen, which is the standard output. You can write it on a file. So that we will look at when we do file handling, right? So if I do print 1, 2, 3, then if I say separator equal to comma, right? And then end equal to space, right? And then if I do print 2, 4, 6, and then separator equal to, let's say we will put a 5, right? If I run this, so now when the first print statement ran, the separator is comma, so 1, 2, 3 is printed, and then we said like end is space. So instead of a new line, we said that okay, I want space as a end of that print function, right? So 1, 2, 3 is printed and the space is printed. Now 2, 4, and 6 needs to be separated with the 5 because we overridden the SCP parameter, which is separator, right? So this is the first of the function, right? So something that you would use to display things on your screen. Okay. The second thing is input. Okay. So input is a function where you can accept data from the keyboard, right? So this is something that would be very helpful if you are writing a menu-driven program, right? Like, so you run a program on your terminal and then it displays some prompts. You need to enter some values. So this would be ideal. Okay. And for Python 2, it is called raw input, raw underscore input, not input. Okay. So there is a different function that is being used there. So what we do with the input function is we can optionally enter a prompt variable, prompt string, and then you assign the value to the to a variable so that you can utilize that in the program. Okay. So let's do this. Let's say name equal to input, enter. right? And then we do a print. Right? So when we do, when we execute this, so it is going to prompt something like this. The same thing would happen on the terminal as well. We'll quickly do that also. Then let's say I'm giving MK, so it simply prints. Okay. So something you need to remember about this input function, right? So even though you are prompting the user to enter some number or something else, whatever has been entered by the user, it will be a text. Okay, so it will be a string. Okay, so it will be a text that will go from your keyboard to Python. So if you are expecting numbers, then there will be additional processing you need to do. Okay, so I just want you to remember two things. Raw underscore input is a function in case if you are using Python 2, and when as soon as you type something and press enter, whatever you typed will go into the variable that the input function is being assigned to, and the data that goes into the variable is a text or a string. Okay. The third thing is the dir function. Okay, so the dir function is very helpful uh, in the sense like in Python, everything is an object. Okay, so when we talk about object in terms of object-oriented programming, so that means everything will have some attributes and some methods that the object can act upon its attributes, right? So we don't need to really know a lot of object-oriented programming to understand that. So every thing, like every variable, for example, is an object, right? So if the object has attributes and methods, the dir function provides a way to access those. Okay, so you simply say dir without any parenthesis, without any parameter. It is going to return the initial Python environment variables that are there in your execution, be it in your program or be it on a shell, right? So if you provide a variable name, it is going to give you some the information about that variable name. Okay, we will look at what those are shortly. And then the next function is the help. Okay, so let's say you ran a dir function on a variable and then it said like, okay, I have these methods, right? And you want to know how those method works. Or even like, you want to know how the print function works or how the input function works. Okay, you simply have to pass variable name dot method name or built-in function name or simply variable name, like whatever you want to get help on, because every object will have some sort of built-in help and information. Even if you are creating your own object, you would be able to do that. The help is the way to get that information. So it will be very helpful. And then there is a type function. So to get, if everything is an object, we need to know what type the object is, because there are certain common types. You would know what features are available. Okay. So the third, fourth, and fifth, right? Dir, help, and type, which would be really helpful for you as a beginner to understand the variables, the values that you will be processing, while you learn something either on a shell or a, Anaconda, Jupyter notebook. Okay, so let me show you something. Okay, so we already have the name variable already, right? So let's see what is the type of the name variable, right? So the type is a string, right? So now let's run the dir function without any parameter. So it says in out underscore underscore 5. So there are a lot of underscore separated variables, and then there is exit, get Python, and quit. Okay. So whatever you see with underscores, right? Like, so they are all some private variables that are available used by Python, right? And this is the special one, right? Anything that you see with the double underscore in the beginning and the double underscore in the end, so those are Python specific variables. Okay. So it is recommended you don't create your own variables with the two underscores prefix and two underscore suffix. Okay. Even though Python won't complain. So this is the way Python make sure that whatever environment variable or internal variable it is using while the execution doesn't collide with the variable names created by the user. Okay. So DAR would give you this kind of information, right? So now let's look at what DAR will give you on the name variable, because DAR it varies, right? So now DAR is giving, like these many methods, right? It is, since it is string, so it is giving all this check, right? So many almost 10 plus functions. So whatever value you pass, so if you want to check, is it an alphanumeric, is it an alphabet, is it ASCII value, is it decimal, in the sense like you have number and dots, is it a digit series of numbers, is it an identifier, like in the sense like whatever you passed, can it qualify a variable name, is it lowercase, is it numeric, does it have all printable characters, is it all space characters? When I say space, it means like, so did we have only blank, tabs, new line, carriage return, or vertical tab? And then is it a title case? Is it uppercase, right? So it provides so many methods that probably you might have to write on your own, right? And then if you look here, so there is a lower, so it converts the data into lowercase. And then, so you have this upper, right? And title, swap case. And then you can also do starts with, like, does a particular string start with certain character or a certain set of characters. So all these checks and conversions, can are all part of this name variable, because it is a string, and name is a variable which is also an object that has attributes and methods, right? So we saw the type, and then we saw this one, right? So probably for the help function, let me show you on the shell, probably it might be. So I want to know some information about the print function, right? So if you look at, so it is giving me whatever I have shown you, right? So it is print accepts value. The triple dots means like you can have more of those. And then the separator, space is a blank default separator, and new line is the default end of record character. And then the file it is going to write is sys.stdout. So even though it is not a file, the system.stdout is something that will point to your screen, right? And then flush equal to false means like if you're writing it into a file, so it will keep it in the IO buffer rather than committing into the file every time you issue a print statement. Okay, so it is giving me the syntax, what are the possible parameters, and then it gives like print the value to a stream. So it can be a file stream, it can be any kind of stream, or to sys.stdout by default. Optional keyword argument is file, separator, and flush. Okay, so a simple function You don't have to Google. You don't have to move away from your terminal. You can get whatever documentation you want in order to use it. Okay. So now let's say I have name equal to empty, right? So we saw that name has a lower function or upper function, right? So if I say help name dot lower, so it is saying lower method of built-in string instance, okay, and then returns a copy of the string converted into lowercase. Now let's see whether it does or not, right? Name dot lower. It does. Okay. So help, again, it is an excellent inbuilt documentation that you can utilize. Okay. Obviously, you can use Google or sites like Stack Overflow to get more information, but the more you practice on a terminal, it will be easier for you. Okay. Then finally, there is one more function I would like to show you before we talk about variables and operators and other things, right? So there is a function called range. Okay. So the reason I am including this particular function is because so there are certain places where so you have a catch-22, right? So like, in order to use loops, you might need to know about complex data types. And then if you want to know more about the complex data type, so when I say complex data type, that means a variable that can hold more than one value. You need to know how to use a loop to process this. Okay, so it is like, way to start. Okay, so a range is a function that can be a stopgap. So in the sense, like, I can teach you loop now, then I don't need to tell you about how the sequences or multiple values are stored or used. Yet I would be able to demonstrate. So what this range function does is, so it accepts 1, 2, or 3 parameters. Okay, there's only one parameter that is mandatory. So if you give one parameter, it is going to be a stop value, right? If I say range of 10, so it will give me a value from 0 to 10. 10 is not included. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way till 9. So it is going to give me 10 whole numbers. Okay. So if you give only one parameter, it is going to be the stop value. If you give two parameters, so that is going to be the start value and stop value. Okay, for example, like you want to, just pass down the random faces, get a random face of a dice, right? So you need to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So range 6 won't help because it will give you 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you have to add 1. So what I can give is range 1, 7. So this will give me a list of numbers starting from 1 ending with 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So by default, the increment will be 1. So we can put 2, 3, whatever it is. The step is between each successive number, how many digit difference that we are looking at. Okay. So this is the use of the random function. Okay. So I say this, you will not see 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this will create an object. So when you iterate, you would be able to get the sequence. Okay. For now, I will show you how the data looks like. Right, 0 to 9 is produced. So if I say 1, 7, 1 to 6 is produced. So it is 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. Okay. So this will be really useful, in order to build, uh, the indexes of your array explicitly, right? Or if you want to process a particular loop, n number of times without having increment variables and then checking for conditions. Okay, it's one of the commonly used functions. I just showed you so that like we can quickly look at the loops and conditions, probably like the third day or so. Otherwise like we might have to wait like 4 or 5 days to talk about all the variables, data types and everything, and then before we go on. Okay.
So MK, one quick question: can we just use input for step?
Input for what?
Step. So whatever difference between the sequences, I have just given 2 and it's giving odd number series.
Right.
So can we use it as an input?
As input to what?
So for example, I will just give this command to just give the list where
Okay.
I will mention the start and stop. After that, I will give an input instead of step. So whenever I just run this command, it will ask what should be the step to give this series.
Okay. So that one. You might have to get the input first and then pass it as a third argument, not as an argument to the range function itself. Right.
Okay.
So you can say like what is the start number, what is the end number, and what is the step value, and then probably you can use those variables as a part of your range functions to generate that, right?
Okay.
We can look at it once. I will cover some of those data types. I will show you how exactly we can do that, right?
Okay. Thank you. Yep.
Okay, so this is something that we have already seen, right? So this is how it will look like on a Python shell. Okay, so this is the end of the first topic, right? The introduction, like where we saw, like some features of Python, then a brief history, and something to start with, right? Some hands-on where we talked about some of those functions, which would be very much useful. Okay, so do we have any questions at this moment?
Hey, this is Ganesh here. Actually, I just
Yeah,
have one
Ganesh.
question on the step function, what you were talking about.
The range
So you
function.
said
Okay.
that right, range one.
Yeah.
So the step, are we going to use it only for the incremental order, or can we also use it for a decremental order?
You can use it for a decremental order also, if I remember correctly, right? So you would be able to get a decrement sequence as well, right?
Fine. So I
You
need
could,
to give the prefix of minus hyphen sign, minus sign, if
right.
I
So
want to.
if your start number is smaller than the stop number, then you can give a positive increment, right? If your start number is greater than the small number, then you give a negative increment.
Negatives. Oh, okay.
And you can have both negative also. Like if you want to generate from -1 to -10, you can do that as well.
Right.
Okay.
Fine. Sure, thanks.
Okay. So we have another 20-25 minutes to go. And so today what I'll do is I'll just quickly go over some of the conventions, how we create variables, and then we will look at some of the basic data types. And then when we come back tomorrow, we will mainly look at strings, right? How to format strings and what are the different methods that are available. We already saw using the dir function, and then we will try out some hands-on tomorrow, right? So there will be a continuation. We will talk about data types for the next 2 days, tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. So we will be talking about 9 different data types. Okay, some of them are very simple. They just don't need much to talk about. Some of them needs probably a full session to talk about all the features. Okay, so next 2 to 3 sessions we will be looking into those along with loops and conditions. Okay, so variable is pretty much the bread and butter of any language, right? So if you look at assembly or machine language, so you store something in a register or in a memory, and then you point that to a register, and then you bring data from memory to a register, and then you perform operations. So all those things, probably who are done, like a microprocessor in college, you would all know the fun. I did civil engineering, so I never did, right? So even though I briefly worked on assembly when I was in mainframe, when I was a mainframe programmer. Okay, so in order to avoid all those things, so we have names, and then when you assign something, an address location will be pointed by this name, and then the data is stored there. So retrieval, manipulation, modification, whatever it is, can happen on that name, which will be easy for the programmer to develop, and then which will be easy for the person to maintain as well. Okay. So you assign values or a literal or expression to the variable. So at this point, so think of it as variable that can hold one value. Okay, the value is actually stored in some address location. So we can have uppercase and lowercase alphabets on the variable names. So you can have numbers, you can have underscores. Okay, so as far as I know, there are no limitations how long a variable can be, right? So it can be a variable name that suits to your need, probably 10, 20, 30 characters also, right? But as far as I know, there are no limitations. Okay, so these are the 63 allowed characters of the 256 ASCII sequence. Okay, so these are something that you could use. Uppercase, lowercase, numbers. So basically alphanumeric and underscore. Okay. So Python have certain conventions, right? Whenever you have numbers, number can't be in the first location. Okay. The conventions are, so you create all uppercase variable with underscore or possibly a number to denote constants. Okay. So it is a convention. So basically anybody looking at a variable that is all uppercase, they know it is a constant. Okay. It is not something that is bound, right? Like you can change it if you want to confuse others. But as per convention, you will create uppercase variables with underscore separator for words, possibly numbers, to create constants. Lowercase and underscore a number to create your normal variables, global, local, whatever it is. Okay. There are languages that recommend camel case notations, but like in Python, it is recommended you use all lowercase numbers and underscore for variables. Okay, so and then whenever you are doing object-oriented programming, you could create a variable with underscore as the first character. So that is kind of considered as a private or like a protected variable, semi-private. Okay. And starting with the 2 underscores are strictly private. Okay. So this is again a convention. Okay. So when you create 2 underscore with the 2 underscore prefix, Python does some sort of mangling so that like people cannot directly take the data, refer the data. But unlike the Java public, protected, and private attribute, so here this is just like a gentleman agreement only, right? Like, if you look at a variable, so you decide that is a private variable or a protected variable, and then you don't access it. Okay. And then when you start and end your string with the 2 underscores, so those are Python variables. Okay. Again, this is something that Python uses as a convention. Okay. There is nothing that is stopping you from doing it, but it is recommended that you don't use variables starting with 2 underscores and 2 underscore prefix and 2 underscore suffix. Okay. So broadly, first of all, everything is an object, right? That means a variable is also is an object. So you can have your own user-defined object. So that is where the object-oriented programming is coming into picture. So where you create your classes. Okay. So but Python provides 9 or possibly 10 different data types. Okay. So first of all, we have numbers, right? So there is integer, whole numbers. There is floating point numbers, scientific notation like 10.3 or 3.14. And then you have complex numbers. Okay. So you might remember that real and imaginary part, 1 plus 2, I, and so on, right? So in case your project need complex number calculation, especially if you are into some hardware, some sort of projections and all, so there is a built-in data type available to deal with complex number. Probably this is owing to the nature that Python was developed in a university first. Probably, those folks needed complex number support. Then you have Booleans. So that is the truth or false, right? So that is the second data type. Second category of data. And then you have strings. Strings is a sequence of text, right? So Python has probably like four different ways you can write a string. So you can enclose a series of text within single quotes, within double quotes, within a set of 3 single quotes, within a set of 3 double quotes. Okay. So these are the 5 basic data types. When you look at the screen, so you will have the data type names, and there is something in the parentheses, right? Int, float, complex, bool, and str. Okay. So these are the built-in functions corresponds to those data types. Okay. So if you really want to convert from one data type to another, you will use these functions. For example, like I told you, when you get input from the keyboard, even though you type a number, Python reads it as a string, right? But if you want to do some arithmetic operation, you might need to convert the string into a number. Okay, so there are 5 functions, one per data type, that can do a conversion of the input to corresponding data type. And it can happen only if the input is valid to be converted. Okay, so if you try to convert ABC, a string, into an integer, it will blow up and give you an error. But if you have 1, 2, 3 within quotes, which is a string, if you want to convert that into a number, you could do that. Okay. So if you look at it, I mentioned there are 73 or 75 functions. So just on the day 1, without even writing much of coding, so we have seen around 11 of those functions, right away. Okay. So let me show you some examples, right? So let's say I will put I equal to 10, and then S equal to hello, which is a string, and then floating point 3.14, and then a complex, let's say 2 plus 3j, right? And then a Boolean, let's say true. Okay. So here is some variables for each data type, and then some value, right? So you have string, you have complex number. The Boolean has 2 distinct values, right? True and false, with a capital T and capital F. So if you look at type of integer, okay, so it's of a class int. It's a string, complex, Boolean, and then string. Okay, so these are the 5 basic data types. Okay. So now let's look at some operations, right? So the basic arithmetic operators you already know, the plus for addition, and then minus for subtraction, star for multiplication, and then slash for division. Probably you might already know the double star is for exponent, right? Power. And then finally, this is probably something that you might be aware of. Modulus, right? So when you divide one number by another number, so you could either get a decimal value or you could get two things, quotient and remainder. Okay. So the percentage symbol is also called a modulus operator, so which will give the remainder. Okay. So this will be helpful. So if you want to do some loops or some process, like so what they call it is a clock arithmetic, right? So like after a particular sequence, then it will start all over again. Like the reason it is said clock arithmetic, because in the clock we will start with 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m. and then 12 p.m., 1 p.m., 2 p.m. and so it will cycle from 1 to 12, right? So the percentage symbol, instead of giving the actual division, so it will divide the number, it will give all the remainder, right? So 8 divided by 3 is 2 times, and the remainder is 2, right? This is something that you may not be familiar with unless otherwise you come from a mainframe background. So there is a scripting language that supports this. So the double slash means integer division. So that means it is going to give you the quotient, right? Let me show you this one. 11 by 3 is 3 times 3, 9, and then there is a remainder of 2. So the first 4 symbols, arithmetic operators, might be familiar to you. Double star, I still think so. The modulus operator, I assume that you are already aware. Probably the double slash is one thing that you might not be aware of. Okay, so which is an integer division. It just gives you the quotient. Okay, so if you just want to divide and then get the answer, you use a slash, right? So if you want to get the remainder alone, you use a percentage. If you want to get the quotient alone, you use the double slash. Okay, so what if you want to get the remainder and quotient as two separate variables? Okay, so you can say a equal to 11, b equal to 3, q equal to 11, sorry, and then r equal to 11 mod 3, right? So q comma r. So here you get 3 and 2. So this is one way. What if like you really want you don't want all this kind of operation, right? So there is another built-in function called div mod. Okay, so we already know what a is, what b is. So if I simply call div mod a comma b, it simply gives me whatever I calculated myself, right? So this here is another function which simply gives you two values as a return value. One is the first is the quotient, and then another one is the remainder. Okay, so this is on the numbers, right? So it can be on the whole numbers, or let's say f equal to 3.14, right? And then f multiplied by 1.5. So that is our floating point value as well, right? So what about strings, right? So S1 equal to hello, S2 equal. So I have two strings, hello and world. So string supports two operators, not just two operators, like the two of those operators that we have seen so far. Okay, one is the plus operator, which means concatenation, right? And there is also this. Okay, so let me just put a space. So it simply concatenates two strings and then create a new string. So plus is a concatenation in the context of strings. So if two of your inputs operands are like strings, it concatenates. If they are numbers, then it adds, or it adds up. Okay. And then here is your another operator, the star. The star from the string context is multiplication. Using the multiplication is called a repetition operator. If I say S1 star 3, it repeats the string 3 times. Okay, so now Python is very particular about what type of data you are doing these operations, right? So if I say S1 plus 10, we are getting a type error because we are trying to concatenate a string and an integer. Okay, so if I do 10 plus S1, again, operation is same, but since the first value is a number, it is saying unsupported operand type for plus int and str. Okay, so Python still can customize based on what is your first value. So you can't actually concatenate two different types. Okay, so the plus expects two numbers or two strings, right? On the other hand, S1 star 3, right? So this is hello, or you could also do either way, it works fine because of the law of associativity, right? So what if I say S1 star S2? Now the star operator in string context expects the first to be a string and the second to be a number, or so on, like one integer and then one number. Sorry, one string and one number. So if it is not, you will get error. Okay, so we will talk more about this kind of errors. Okay, so now let's talk about the input function again, right? So we are saying n1 equal to input, enter a number, right? So it is asking for a number. I'm just going to enter 10, and then enter another number, which is going to be, right? So I'm just going to enter 20. Then I'm just saying result equal to n1 plus n2, right? And then print, right, n1 comma plus I'm just simply constructing an equation, right? You may not see what you are expected to see. So it is giving me 10 plus 20 equal to 1020. Okay, this is because the reason I told you, right? So it got 10 as a string, right? When we say string, it is an ASCII representation of 1 and 0, right? When we say number, it is going to be a binary representation of the number 10. So what we are supposed to do is, we're supposed to do like n1 equal to int of n1, right? Because it's a string, there is an int function that is available that takes an input which is which looks like a number and then converts that into a number. And then same thing with N2. And then we do a result. Now you get it. Okay. So now let's look at start equal to input. Right, so I'll say 1, stop, I'll say 10, probably step, I'll say 3, and now if I say list range start stop step, so I have 1, 4, and 7. Okay, so if at all you are expecting or if you are retrieving data from a keyboard, what you need to ensure is you need to convert the data into appropriate data type. Okay, so if you remember,
Stop you here. So any input from the keyboard is always considered as text only, string only. It
yes,
cannot be of any other data type.
no, it cannot be. Yes.
Okay.
So
then this is tedious, right? In case it's if I'm developing a system, let's keep it for a shopping or something which is going to be more of numbers. Then so in that case, Python won't be suitable for such applications, is it? Where I have to convert everything into integer.
okay, first of all, what you are talking about is like a shopping cart or something like that, right? So
No,
there
like
you
yeah,
okay.
my question is, it's taking input from the user always as string, means then I have to keep converting into all the other data types and only then I do my required function, right?
Right. Yes, that is tedious, but again, you cannot have it all, right? So Python supports this flexibility in data type so that you could have any value and then you could code logically, right? But think about, you have an application, you might expect a number, whole number, floating point, or text. Like you have to declare 3 different type of variables, and then all sorts of, instead of just writing one line to get your input, so you might end up in writing a paragraph thing, right? So yes, you need to convert it, but again, that is the part of the language itself. There are actually frameworks where you can force data to be a certain data type. So when you read it, it automatically takes care. But for that, you need to use either like object-oriented programming like construct, or some other framework. So if you want to process data like this, and again, this is something that is useful. It has a limited use. So if you are a beginner learning something, it will be helpful. And if you're writing menu-driven programming, there you may not perform calculations. Like probably you'll have 1, 2, 3, 4 certain options you display. You ask the user to, like select an option. So that time, a number itself may not be used as a number. It might be used as a ASCII literal. Okay. Yep. So if you need to use this, yeah, we have to live with that. But again, you could write a function, right? Like one time. You could automatically call that, right? I can simply say n1 equal to get number, right? And then it will simply say start. You will just put 1, and then the get number automatically gets the value using the input function, and then it will convert that into an integer and then store it automatically. So there are workarounds we could definitely do. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
I hope somebody else asked. I think Praveen or somebody else asked this thing, like step thing. So that helps. Okay. So we are. It's 11:48. I am just going to stop here.